All right, ladies and gentlemen, it appears that the second part of Prydwen's 2.2 updates are finally here. And this is going to incorporate a lot of things, a lot of the new additions that have come to the roster. Characters like Arrow Rover, and of course, the big reassortment of the Whimpering Waste tier list, considering all of the new changes that have occurred to the game mode in 2.2. So with that, I just wanted to take some time to get into what all of those updates are and, you know, what my opinion is on some of those changes, because I've had experience in the new Whimpering Wastes. I've had opinions about Spectral Rover, and I just want to see if, you know, those thoughts are being shared across the board. So with that, let's go ahead and let's get right on into our tier list. Now that Kuro Games lowered the HP pools of Whimpering Waste back to its intended difficulty, it is much easier now. We were able to properly test the whole cast in WhiWa to come up with some new tier list changes. We'll list them below. We've also finally gotten around to drawing some conclusions on Arrow Rover. They'll be present on both tier lists, so let's get the two TOA changes out of the way first. And boy, oh boy, I've got some thoughts about Arrow Rover. So let's see. They're not very good. Let's see how it pans out. Arrow Rover added as a tier 3 support. Arrow Rover is a character who has some problems they can't really work around. First of all, they have a dedicated free-to-play accessible 5-star weapon with an amazing effect for them, and it drastically enhances their kit because it provides the whole team with arrow damage amplify. Here's the thing, and this is the big thing. It's locked at 10% amplify at R1 right now. Let me just show you all in game kind of like what we're talking about over here. Arrow Rover, you can see I've been using them. This effect is cool. Arrow damage dealt by nearby resonators on the field is amplified by 10% for 30 seconds, right? And as you upgrade it, right, it goes up by 4%. And so at R5, it's 26%. Really good, right? But unfortunately, this weapon is basically tied to their kit and essentially adds to their kit. And without this amplify bonus being particularly high, Arrow Rover in their current state is kind of just one of the worst supports in the game, because this 10% damage amp is not enough to even be better than the baseline amplification ability of other supports. We're Shorekeeper's at 15%, and then Verena over here, right? She's at 15% damage amp for every attribute, by the way. And then we also have Baija, who's gonna come in with another 15%. And so that's kind of like an issue, because they're just coming in and they have the lowest amp out of all of the supports. It gets a lot better with dupes, but we don't have the dupes right now, and that amplification is only to arrow damage. And so their supporting ability at a baseline is just much lower than other units. So yeah, it's not very good. And even when they gain access to R5, it won't be that impressive compared to Shorekeeper or Verena in terms of buffing potential, but it still will be pretty nice, and it will be a great free-to-play option once it's R5. Besides, it's exclusive to Arrow teams, so aside from this niche Gion option, it kind of doesn't fit anywhere. But if you are using Gion and it is at R5, it should be good, but we can't even access that power right now. I have personally used Arrow Rover with Gion and Mortifi, and Alto as well, and it's worse than every other support currently. So even in the one team where it feels like they should be working, it is still worse than every other option in the present. I would actually make the recommendation to most players that they shouldn't really even build their Arrow Rover right now. Unless they're really trying to do like some weird quick swap team where Arrow Rover is not even like, you know, Arrow Rover's on like Emerald of Genesis or something else and they're not being on their signature weapon. That's probably where your investment should go. Not into Arrow Rover, pretty much any other character, because right now they're not good. They also have some rapid fire issues, including a lack of teams, a lack of buffing potential, and a rotation much longer than the top supports, a lack of damage compared to other choices, and they also fulfill a role on their team that's contested by many meta options. You know, like the ones we just talked about. A lack of access to their full kit. They're locked at S1, R1, when really they should have their R5 weapon right now. And it takes away the possibility to use the crucial Spectral Rover and Havoc Rover, who are all very good characters. You also have a lack of being able to exploit their full kit because no one uses Arrow Erosion right now. And the only debuff applier we have is Confession Phoebe, who you'd rather just use Phoebe in Absolution and then pair them with Spectral Rover. So Arrow Rover's kind of already out of the equation if you already own Phoebe. Unless you're just trying to grief your team and grief your clear time, then feel free to go ahead to use Confession Phoebe and Arrow Rover and, you know, stack the erosion up. It's not going to be good though. This isn't even mentioning their inconsistency problems. Against smaller enemies, they won't be able to hit their mid-air attacks all the time, because that's kind of like how the hitboxes work. They're slashing up in the air and they can like miss a lot of the stuff at the bottom, which is crucial to their rotations and can mess you up completely if you don't hit them. You won't build up their Forte circuit, you won't use their enhanced skill, and you won't be able to access these buffs because you have to use their enhanced skill with the full Forte circuit, which you can only build up by using the air attacks. And no matter what changes happen to their synergies and damage or buffing potential, this won't be helped. Maybe they'll fix the hitbox in future versions. All in all, they land as a bottom tier character, but hopefully they find some use in the future when someone allows them to exploit their kit. Hopefully when the next Arrow Erosion character releases, it won't be as clunky to use them. But right now, I do feel like they cannot really be a good choice at the moment. When they do have their R5 weapon, I do think a lot of stuff changes. But for right now, I do think releasing them with just only S1R1 was a bit of a miss, a bit of a mistake. And it's a little bit rough. It's a little bit rough in typical gameplay. Now we got an update to Tao Chi. We got an update to Tao Chi, ladies and gentlemen. On her end of things, Tao Chi has seen a rise in usability ever since Carlotta came out, going from tier 3 to tier 2 as a budget buffer for her. She's faster than the other budget resonant skill amplify option, Lumi. She's actually faster than Lumi in building up Concerto. Keep that in mind, unless you double intro into Lumi with Marina instead of Shorekeeper. But this doesn't help in the best possible teams. Just don't use Lumi. And while she still buffs less than Lumi with max sequence nodes gives an attack buff to the entire team. So this, in combination with her resonance skill amplification, can actually lead to higher damage. Unfortunately, the situation with Lumi over here is that this only lasts 10 seconds, and you got to do some fucked up rotations to even use it in the Carlotta team. Her cooldowns, Tao Chi's cooldowns, typically line up perfectly with Carlotta's if you optimize your Yang Yang, because Yang Yang tends to be too fast for Carlotta to keep up, even if the two work brilliantly for more casual players. So the Tao Chi, Yang Yang, Carlotta team is what they're talking about over here. All in all, Tao Chi provides buffing for Carlotta with cooldowns that line up just right, and this factor allows her to find a legitimate use case if you like premium options like Jeja for the Montelli lady, justifying a rise to tier 2. I've been saying this since patch 2.0 actually dropped and Carlotta actually released. Tao Chi is not really a tier 3 character anymore because of her heavy buffing for Carlotta and the fact that you really just need Discord and like a +0 Moonlit Clouds on her to reach like her full buffing potential. I'm glad that there's recognition being done of that power because I've done so many Carlotta clears in the TOA with like a half built, 20% built Tao Chi, and it's worked out pretty well. Great job from Prydwen over here. They hit the mark on all these TOA changes. I think they hit the mark. They hit the nail right on the head. It makes a ton of sense, and I'm glad that they're being honest about the current state of Arrow Rover because holy moly, they're a little bit of an issue at the moment. I really thought they were going to have more dupes of the weapon available at launch, and the fact that they don't and it's stuck at R1 makes the unit kind of unplayable. We talked about the TOA. Now let's get into WhiWa. And boy, oh boy, they've got quite a bit to go through over here. Cantarella is added as a tier 1.5 hybrid. To understand Cantarella's placement, we need to look at what she does. She buffs Havoc and skill damage. In terms of skill damage, she's not that good with Changli. Changli is not really a great recipient of an outro buff unless it's Brance, and Jinsei isn't that strong in WhiWa. And Carlotta has much better teammates in the form of Brant and Jeja, also true. Finally, in terms of Havoc damage, no character truly stands out aside from Camellia in WhiWa. And unfortunately, Rosia, Sanhua, and Dan Jin are all better than Cantarella at buffing Camellia. This makes Cantarella difficult to stand out, so we're placing her in tier 1.5 for now. I do think that Cantarella definitely has way more AoE damage than a character like Jeja, and I would say that the Cantarella Jinsei team does a lot better than the Cantarella Jeja team in WhiWa. And so I don't think that's enough to bump up Cantarella to tier 1.0. I do think tier 1.5 is fair, but I think that also means that Jeja should be bumped down to like tier 2 or below. I'm still gonna be real here. I think Jeja is straight up the worst fucking character I've ever seen in Whimpering Wastes. She is just like so absurdly, disgustingly bad. It's ridiculous. So single target focused in a game mode that just really doesn't want you to do that sort of stuff. That's gonna be my initial opinion on that. Now we got Arrow Rover added in as a tier 3 support, and they got the TOA explanation that we saw. However, do be aware that Arrow Rover is worse in WhiWa than TOA because small enemies are the name of the game, right? All of those tiny little Lottie Lost, all those wolves, Arrow Rover's attack can just straight up miss them, and they won't be able to hit them with their mid-air attacks all the time, forcing you to alter your rotation and make things less smooth. And so yeah, that's kind of like where that small enemy issue is really coming to a head even worse, especially in WhiWa where there are a lot of small enemies. They can spawn in like waves of 10 at once. Baija is placed on the watch list. This time around, Baija isn't on the watch list to go down, but to go up. And it all depends on one factor, the Plunder's Captain Seal token. And so I've actually already made a video about this. Baija is probably the best activator of Plunderer's Seal at low budget in the game. She has more healing ticks than any other character, and the end result is that she can battery this Plunderer's Captain Seal, which deals a huge amount of electro damage, you know, as long as your team is actively getting healing. And the end result is that, well, she actually performs exceedingly well, almost in some cases outperforming some of the 5-star limited options when you're using the Plunderer's Captain Seal. And that means it does, yeah, those huge electro nukes after dealing instances of healing, and it makes clearing the content much easier when your team can't exploit the specialized buffs. So far, only gold tokens have changed in the mode, so if it turns out that the purple tokens always stay the same, she'll go up a tier, as she is basically the best battery for this token on the roster. However, if purple tokens do change, and Baizha, let's just say the Plunderer's Captain Seal gets removed or gets nerfed, then Baizha is going to stay. But if it stays as is, she'll go up, and I think it's warranted. Brand's going from tier 1 to tier 0.5. A little bit base set. Something we initially missed on Brand is that his Forte Anchor nuke has a lingering hitbox that stays for a long time. You know, he does the whole thing, return from ashes, smashes down, and then you'll basically have a lingering hitbox that makes it able to delete multiple waves at once. That means when you activate it, you'll typically clear at least 2 waves at once using a single skill. Sometimes it's good luck, sometimes it's good ping. Generally though, as he's able to buff Changli, Changli's one of the best WhiWa units in the game, and nuke multiple waves at once, this makes him a much more powerful WhiWa character than people expected. And so he's being buffed up. I just first tried a S0R1 Brant S0R1 Changli, and I just got like 3.2k points on the first side when I missed multiple anchors. They hit like one enemy. That's how strong the team currently is. It's absurdly ridiculous for performance in the game mode. Carlotta is going from tier 1 to tier 0.5. Interesting. Initially, we placed her in tier 1.5. Turns out Carlotta's a powerhouse in WhiWa, no less. She plays pretty much no different than in the TOA, which makes her super simple to use. Her damage is off the charts, so her big skills can clear multiple waves at once. To top it all off, she has great free-to-play weapon option in the form of Static Mist. This makes her one of the best DPS units in the mode, comfortably tier 0.5 next to Zhang Liao. I'm gonna be real here. I don't necessarily agree with this, but what I would have put in instead was Carlotta at tier 1, but then she gets the expert tag added onto her. Carlotta requires you, at least in my opinion, to alternate your rotations, make use of the fact that your Forte enhanced heavy attack reduces the cooldown on your resonance skill. You require good positioning to line up your final liberation shot to actually hit the whole wave, and you want to use like your skill to like pick off enemies, use your echo skill at the right time to pick off enemies, get the next wave to spawn so that your liberation shots don't get wasted. And so I can see how she has tier 0.5 performance, but I do think she needs to be played very well to get that tier 0.5 performance. And so the end result, at least in my mind, is that tier 1 with expert tag to move her up to tier 0.5. I think that just having her at tier 0.5 with no expert tag at all in WhiWa is a bit of a miss. I don't think she's that easy to use. Moving on, we got Changli, tier 0.5 up to tier 0, and the expert tag is removed, and I agree with this. Changli, you just play her to charge up her Forte. You can use her basic attacks. You kind of don't even need to quick swap with her that much, especially if you have a character like Brant. You can kind of just like stay on her, build up her Forte, and then just blow up an entire wave by using it. Use your liberation, blow up another wave, and then use your Forte, your liberation enhanced Forte to blow up a third wave. And if you're doing this all while under the effect of a big outro buff like Brant's, which is 20% fusion, 25% resonance skill, it just kind of clears, and you don't have to play her quick swappy or super sweaty like you might want to in the TOA. So now that Brant's released, Changli is more powerful than ever in WhiWa. He makes her easy to play, and he's able to buff her damage so that she can clear multiple waves on her own without the aid of a second DPS. All the stuff that I just said, right? She retains that team flexibility. EOG, Emerald of Genesis, is amazing on her. And to sum it up, she has everything she needs to be a top tier contender in WhiWa. Because with the WhiWa HP pools going down, the buffs becoming stronger, and the fact that you don't need a player sweaty to access her wave clearing ability, Changli is now actually, I've said this before, I've been saying it since WhiWa released, Changli is a tier 0 WhiWa character because you don't need to play her super sweaty to get amazing results out of her. And that makes her tier 0. And she doesn't need the expert tag when she's in WhiWa. Now we got Encore. Expert tag has been added to move her up 1 slot. Encore surprisingly has a lot of potential to be tapped into for more experienced part of the player base. We initially thought she'd be raised up a tier fully, but at a baseline, she remains difficult to use. Yeah, because she's a low range, basic attack, fusion based DPS that's liberation reliant. And she has some attacks with AoE, but you got to do a lot of animation cancels and stuff to get the most out of it. But they're very low range. Again, which requires precise execution, timing, and positioning, so it warrants an expert tag. I do agree with most of these changes over here. I think that Encore, I've seen the videos of it. She can do really well. Changelog is also very, very, very good. But the main thing is, I don't agree with sort of like the Carlotta moving up over here. I would agree with an expert tag, though. Now we got Yohu. Tier 2 to Tier 3. Unfortunately for Yohu, buffing coordinated attacks isn't a desirable niche in WhiWa because they're not really that good except for Yinlan's. Coordinated attackers available are either low tier or the high tier coordinated attacks do so through the application of a mark, which doesn't last multiple waves, so it doesn't contribute close to any damage. This makes Yohu have very little justification in the game mode, especially when compared to other healers. So yeah, I do think that Yohu going down to Tier 3 makes a ton of sense. It's not very good. They gave a good reason for it. Yinlan's kind of like the best WhiWa clearing unit, but that's because she can just spam the coordinated attacks super fast, build up her concerto really fast, and be a great buffer. That's kind of like the main focus of her. We've covered all the tier list changes. It makes a lot of sense to me what we've been seeing. Now, let's just go over what the actual tier list is looking like now that we have all those updates in. So, we've already covered all of these units in the past review that we had earlier this week. Nothing too crazy is going on over here. The main addition that we're going to be seeing is Tao Chi going up to Tier 2 and then Arrow Rover coming in at Tier 3. Makes a lot of sense. Arrow Rover is completely kind of close to unplayable right now. Every other option is basically better than them, but we might see this change as they get more and more ranks of their sequence nodes and their weapon. But right now, I don't recommend building this unit. I thought we were going to get more refinements of their weapon on release, but it's not close. And then Tao Chi moving up, perfectly fine because she performs very, very, very well with Carlotta. So that's going to be the TOA list. I know that was short, but we've already covered it in a prior video. Now let's get into Whimpering Waste. And boy, oh boy, this is where stuff is going a little bit crazy. We now have a new character joining Tier 0 in the form of Changelog with no expert tag. And we've already gone over the reasoning. I perfectly agree with this. She's very easy to play to get a lot of results out of, and she's joining the upper echelons with Camellia and Gian, kind of like the best units. Carlotta is moving up to tier 0.5. I personally don't agree with this. I think she should be in tier 1 with the expert tag because you kind of have to do some interesting rotations, reorder your skills, play with a lot more intentionality and positioning for Carlotta to perform exceedingly well in this game mode. She can do it. I've had a lot of success with her, but you have to play with a lot more precision and in a lot of ways, right, as a bit more of an expert to get those full results. I think tier 1 with an expert tag to move her up to tier 0.5 would probably be a better compromise for the unit because there's a lot of ways to fuck her up, especially if you're just playing her on autopilot, just going through your liberation shots, doing all of that. We got Brant moving up to tier 0.5 because of his lingering hitbox and his ability to clear multiple waves and his incredible buffing for Changelog. Makes sense to me. I think it's a fair analysis. You know, when you consider what all these other characters are bringing to the roster, I think it makes a ton of sense. Baija's on the watch list to potentially move up to tier 1 because of her amazing synergy to the Plunderer's Captain Seal. Makes sense to me. Very fair. I've had a lot of success using her, even at level 50 with, you know, not even her second inherent ability. And everybody else, really no other changes other than Arrow Rover popping in at, you know, the very bottom over here because of their issues with hitting the mobs. And then we're going to have Yohu being bumped down as well because, well, every other healer is better and coordinated attacks aren't particularly good. When we look at the placement of everybody else still currently in the meta, like there's a lot of stuff that didn't change. I do think Camellia and Gian still belong at the top. Zhang Liao, especially with the new liberation token, is definitely at the top. He pumps out damage like crazy as long as you're, you know, timing his liberation across the 20-second duration that you have active. Havoc Rover can also clear multiple ways with a lingering hitbox. And then these other characters, right? You need to play them exceptionally well for you to get good results. And so having tier 1.5 with all these expert tags makes a ton of sense to me because they can be played and you can get really high scores with these units, but you got to be giga sweaty with them. And so I'm just glad that they're incorporating how difficult these units are to use effectively because there's a lot of room for error. There is a lot of room for error here. Chisha's down here because she's very single target and we got Calcharo coming in, but you can, you know, you can make these units work if you're really sweating. Alto's garbage in here. Taochi is not that good because she doesn't really do that much damage. Lumi is just really single target focused. Jianjin is way too slow. Yanwu is useless. And yeah, I think these placements here are relatively okay. When it comes to tier 1.5, I do think Jeja should actually be dropped down. I do actually think that Jeja should be dropped down. I believe that her performance, especially her lack of AoE on pretty much all of her abilities and her coordinated attacks, really being single target focused while also being a big chunk of her damage, makes her feel so disgusting in the game mode. I think there's an argument to say that part of the reason why Jinxie is so low is because a lot of people are trying to use Jinxie with Jeja in the game mode. And I'm going to be real here, trying to use Jinxie and Jeja together in WhiWa is actually akin to like torture. It is one of the most disgustingly bad team comps I've ever seen in the game. And using Jinxie with like Yinlin is better than using Jinxie with Jeja. And I'm pretty sure using Jinxie with Cantarella is a lot better than using Jinxie with Jeja in this game mode. Are you high? I think that Jeja is actually so bad in this game mode that she should probably be bumped down to tier 2. That's going to be my take on the overall tier list as a whole. I do think that they've done a lot of work here to, you know, judge some of the placements. I like the movement of Changli. I don't really like the movement of Carlotta. I think she's an expert tag. And I do think Jeja is a lot worse than Cantarella in the game mode. But maybe Jeja's ability to buff Carlotta's damage is what's really, you know, keeping her in tier 1.5. And I do think that once Cantarella has a unit that can fully leverage her resonance skill and havoc damage amplification, we might actually see her bumped up to maybe like tier 1 or maybe even tier 0.5. That's going to be my take on all the updates. I think the main takeaway from all these tier lists and all the changelogs is that, well, Arrow Rover is a bit of a dud. And Cantarella doesn't have her full potential yet, but it's something that we're going to see expand hopefully a lot more into the future because this guy's going to get more dupes of his weapon. And let's be real here, right? Arrow Rover should be a really competitive and strong support for Jian once their weapon is at R5. And so by that basis alone, Arrow Rover should at least be, you know, somewhat close to at least tier 2 or maybe tier 1.5 based off their buffing ability and how they're going to work with this unit, who is one of the best overall WhiWa characters. We can't R5 at this patch, or maybe we will in an event later. But once that's R5, we should hopefully see this person move up a little bit higher in the rankings. But for right now, yeah, they're dog shit in Whimpering Wastes, and in TOA, they're also dog shit as well. It is really unfortunate what has happened on their release because they're super hyped up in the story, but they're kind of absolutely just trash, at least at this moment in time. So that is what it is. I think Prydwen did a great job over here, and I think with this update following up on the first one that they made earlier for 2.2, I think they've rounded it out pretty well. I think they rounded out the roster really well. Just a couple of like tags and placements, at least with the expert one that I have in mind, that can spruce it up, but it's pretty much like a 95 to 97.5% accurate to me. So great job. Hats off. Let me know what you all think. Peace.